In this video, I beat the entirety of Red Dead Redemption 2 the way Rockstar intended. From the beautiful, compelling story, to the wrangling of extremely rare horses, the killing of legendary animals, and the catching of legendary fish. The 9 crazy and extreme challenges, the coach, shop and home robberies, the stranger missions, the gunslingers, treasure hunting, cigarette cards, exotics, dinosaur bones, hunting requests, dream catchers, gangs, special characters, and most importantly, many so-called secrets within the game. And I did this all for the first time ever. I had never even played a Rockstar video game before this. When I made a similar video but for Skyrim, it seemed people enjoyed hearing from a somewhat oblivious player's perspective, because I'd only played about 20 hours of Skyrim prior to that video. My friend Lewis recommended that I should do Red Dead Redemption 2 next. He said it's the greatest video game ever made. So I found the book online and skimmed through it, realizing that yes, the whole point of this game is the freedom to decide. But within this book, there is definitely many recommendations that do hint towards how Rockstar intended the game to be played. It even goes into depth on the intended way to shoot your gun. And this book is designed to be read by new players. It was written and put together very well. It doesn't spoil anything, yet it is very detailed and insightful. There are many things within this book you wouldn't even know about after 500 hours of playing. To reach 100% completion the way Rockstar intended, it took me about 180 hours of gameplay. And I tell you what, I didn't fall in love with this game straight away. I was really struggling with the controls and it just wasn't living up to my high expectations. But something happened. I was just mildly enjoying the first chapter. Then, within 10 hours, I started to feel a bit of a connection to the game's characters, and the shootouts and the robberies were becoming quite exhilarating. By 30 hours, I was completely hooked. And that's the thing, by 100 hours, I was even more deeply ingrained within this world. But it kept getting crazier. 150 hours in, I was having more fun in the game than ever. And it kept going until I completely finished all that was inside of this incredibly detailed book. I've never played a game that seemed to somehow get better and better. My awe for this game was of genuine surprise because it excelled my high expectations. And after further research and contemplation, I don't think I realized how far ahead Rockstar Studios really is. I mean, how could I have? I'm a massive gaming noob and that's the point of this channel. I want to explore video games for the incredible art that they are. Hence why at the end of this video, I also beat the original game, making my first Rockstar experience pretty extraordinary, especially because these games are randomly far more emotional and meaningful than I expected. So I hope you will join me on my journey through this incredible piece of collaborative art. Hopefully my new experiences of this game can give you that sense of awe you felt when you first played Red Dead Redemption 2. So how did Rockstar intend the game to be played? Well, firstly, on the most basic and obvious level, the guide states straight away not to just rush through the game. Instead, it wants us to slowly indulge in the greatness of this open world, advising that you always make time to observe and enjoy the sheer beauty of this world. It really wants you to explore, to delve into mysteries and enjoy the beautiful scenery. And so, I did exactly that. At times this left me in awe, other times it left me horrified. Some moments felt cozy, others genuinely sad, and some even caused some deep existential contemplation. The sheer breadth of this game is pretty insane, and with such a monstrously large world, the guide naturally has many suggestions, such as, to name just a few, taking care of your camp and interacting with them regularly, engaging with literally every encounter you come across in the world, following a specific flow of missions to ensure you don't skip out on key moments, because yes, there are main story missions you can miss, and also time-sensitive stranger missions that are connected to the main plot. Also, because the game often has multiple mission choices at once, the guide seems to lay out an intended canonical story progression, though they might not have put this much thought into it. But this all lays out what you should do, not how you should act in any given situation, because you do have choices. The answer is the defining factor behind the game's intentions, its great overarching theme. Honor. What is the intended way that Rockstar wanted us to behave in an open world game where you have the freedom to decide? While the choice is yours and technically there is no right or wrong way to play the game, high honor is definitely the intended experience. There is a strong thematic push towards playing as an honorable character. The game subtly nudges you in this direction through character arcs, mission availability, dialogue, rewards, and ultimately the best ending. And I could even go on from here. Playing honorably isn't just about mechanics, it's about embracing the true identity of Arthur Morgan. But it goes even deeper than this. You see, when we look at the intended way of playing the game, we also see Rockstar's intentions behind making the game. other than money, of course. But this, in my opinion, is the most incredible thing about Red Dead Redemption 2. It already is the most realistic and compelling open world I've ever played. It's genuinely almost overwhelmingly good. But on top of this, the reward in the game isn't golden plunder. It isn't about finding some paradise or happiness, it's simply about being kind and selfless. The reward we get is mitigating suffering and helping others, not for redemption or ego, but rather for the act itself. A good game is fun, but it can distract you from your life and responsibilities, thus causing some significant issues to fester. But a great game, something like Red Dead Redemption 2, can make you a better and more responsible person outside of the game. Of course, this is completely personal, and you could still fall into some form of degeneracy with how large and fun the game is, but for me personally, I found I took the learnings from the story, took Arthur Morgan's spirit in a sense, to become more mindful of others and attempt to be a kinder person. This isn't easy, and it's also somewhat ego-driven, a sort of spiritual materialism, but we are all deeply flawed one way or another, presuming self isn't just an illusion. But nonetheless, the recognition and awareness is there, seek no absolution. So let's go into my actual experience with the game, the choices I made, and my opinions about the rest. I should note that because this was 180 hours of gameplay, there was inevitably a lot of error on my part. For example, after these men killed this lady's husband and were about to kidnap her, I saved the poor woman. But when taking her back home, I accidentally ran into a tree, tragically killing her. Also, when returning this horse back to its owner, I accidentally trampled a dog and the whole interaction glitched. Thus, I missed out on 10+ honor, which means I didn't technically play the intended way. There were actually many times my horse and I went through some quite traumatic crashes, sometimes killing either one of us. But the biggest mistake I made throughout the game was with clothing. Most of the time I got it right, but occasionally the saved outfits on my horse glitched out or I simply forgot to change. This happened especially when entering a mission where I didn't expect the weather to change so drastically, or when traveling quickly across the map. But like I said, it didn't happen a lot. Also, I think I did manage to keep a healthy weight for myself and the horses I rode, though I wasn't checking my horses as much as myself, so there might have been some more minor error there. Also, something I found really cool was that these two facial appearances are both deemed a healthy weight. So with the scale of weather and weight, there is quite a bit of room for error and it's not the biggest deal. The game begins by showing the Vandalin gang struggling to survive in a world that is outgrowing them. They're on the run after a botched robbery in Blackwater and currently stuck in a fierce snowstorm, which I certainly appreciated from a visual perspective, as straight away the game creates quite an atmosphere. The backstory is important to note, as the character we play, Arthur Morgan, is influenced and shaped by his surroundings. In the intended playthrough, we need to break free from the endless murder and misery the gang causes. And so, the first suggestion the book gives us comes after searching for some shelter to ride out the storm. We run into a raving gang and have to fight them. We kill them all, but one escapes out the back. The guide recommends you spare him, as killing him would only result in a loss of honor. The strange thing about this is, you don't actually lose any honor by killing him, because the honor system hasn't even been introduced into the game yet. So is the guide merely referring to ethics rather than an actual scale of points? We also find an O'Driscoll in the barn. We can either spare or choke him to death. Even though, like I said, the honor system isn't active yet, I spared him. The intended way is more than just points on the honor scale, it's a change in identity. After saving Sadie Adler, the first mission is over. It's here the guide wholeheartedly recommends that for the first playthrough, we don't focus on medal goals. Medals are rewarded in either bronze, silver, or gold after each of the 104 missions. The guide states that if you're aspiring to reach what the game defines as total completion, it is not necessary to achieve every gold medal. I didn't know it at the time, but Abigail, Jack, and John Marston are also very important characters. And this also later affects the intended way to play the game. In the second mission, Abigail asks us to find John after he went missing during the snowstorm. We end up saving his life, something that brings a remarkable story later on. Like, genuinely very epic. Another big moment in chapter 1 is saving Lenny during a botched train robbery. He wouldn't actually die if you left him, but you'd lose 20 honor. There's also the choice to spare the train staff after successfully looting it. With the first chapter over, which mainly served as a tutorial and an introduction to the story, I could finally explore the full open world, except for New Austin. This is where I truly started engaging both with the camp and the open world itself. This included for me getting a minor haircut, changing my clothes. As it was my first time playing, I didn't know it can get a little chilly in this area at certain times. Speaking to strangers, hunting, restocking the camp, and killing some rival gang members who try and threaten me. I then proceeded to hide their bodies, as the guide states this is a good way of not getting caught. I also collected some ingredients, camped, ate some food, and cleaned myself. All things recommended to constantly be aware of. This is another reason this game is so incredible to me. It appeals to the processes of somewhat realistic survival, which creates a deep sense of immersion and connection to the character. At the end of my first day exploring Red Dead Redemption 2, I did get this weird glitch where the night sky was filled with fog or something. I don't really know, but this never happened again. It's time to sleep and start my next day, which brings us to multiple minor but defining moments for our character. First, we have to simply help this man get his horse back. You actually have to do this, but if you antagonize the man after returning the horse, you will lose honor. I should note, I probably should be wearing something a bit warmer in Valentine, but it was fine because the weather wasn't so cold that it was affecting my cause. Here we save the girls from some creepy locals, and then out of nowhere some bloke recognizes us as an outlaw. We steal a horse and then have to make a decision. Do we spare or kill this man who could eventually lead us to imprisonment or death? The intended way is to spare him, and in return the frightened man gives us a somewhat valuable pen. Also, like I said earlier, this game hits nearly every emotional tone. I found this moment hilariously and probably sadly relatable. This world is full of drunk, sodden, and perpetually downcast pixels, and so often we are engaged in brawls. Although very subtle, the book does suggest an intended way to fight. It actually wants us to allow the enemy to attack first, as you can block, leaving your opponent exposed to a couple of quick punches. With Big Tommy, which I'll add is a grounded but epic battle, we kind of have to suffer a little because of his physical stature, but nonetheless, if you do follow the guide's instructions, every fight in the game is very easy. This brawl does leave us very muddy, so I visited the Valentine Hotel for a bath, where I did accept the deluxe bath for 50 cents. Now, I did this because the book does show that a deluxe bath, rather than a regular one, restores both the health and deadeye attributes. I suppose more, let's just say relaxation, helps aid recovery and focus in Rockstar's eyes. This was also the first time I heard the constipated man. I'm not going to lie, with the theme of Valentine's womanizing behaviors, I thought this guy wasn't just taking a poo. I also bring this up because for 180 hours of playing the game, he was taking a poo until at the very end of my playthrough, I heard an argument and then I noticed he was finally gone. I'm not sure if he really did take that poo or not. I also don't know how many people have ever experienced this. This game is monstrous. I could go on forever about every single little detail of my experience. But for brevity's sake and your sacrificial time, I just want to point out some highlights and defining moments in Arthur Morgan's intended character arc. I kept playing the game the same way, completing missions, interacting with the camp, which conveniently rewards you with honor and some soul-inspiring food, and running into world encounters that usually lead to even more honor and rewards. But sometimes I just stopped to take in the beautiful changes in the world's atmosphere. Now, I did leave some room for mischief, as remember, we are technically at the beginning of Arthur Morgan's arc, and he does, at this stage, still act out evil deeds, only now is he becoming aware of his actions' consequences. He kind of justifies his actions with the saying, "This is just how the world is." So when I heard this prospector idiotically declaring out loud he found some gold in the river, I killed him, as in my mind Arthur at this stage in his arc probably would do the same, justifying it's for the good of the gang. I camped, hunted, crafted, helped, stole, and engaged in many interactions, main story-based, stranger-based, and world-based. I lived in this world for hours and hours, and still I was only in chapter 2. One thing I love about this game is the camp. The parties, the songs, the nuanced discussions, it all really satiated whatever part of me was immersed inside of this game. Micah, who for me participates in many of the most enjoyable missions, was someone throughout the camp cycle who kept grabbing my ear. His philosophies of nihilism were genuinely very intriguing, though of course at the time I wasn't aware how these beliefs were going to manifest into indelible action later on. The book also takes you through a play-by-play of every mission, and I did follow this pretty religiously, which some may argue is besides the point of a video game. But personally, I actually really enjoyed this process, because there were so many insights into this world and story that I would never have even known about. And on the other side of the detailed missions are the random little immersive stories within the game, such as these two men fighting because one slept with the other's wife. Unfortunately, the man who slept with the wife won, so I took care of him without losing any honor, because obviously Rockstar foresaw that that's what you're gonna do. Because of moments like this, the guide does recommend visiting towns often. You'll end up seeing a lot of men being idiots, especially with guns, and many more small, yet incredibly little immersive stories. It's funny because in this chapter, at one stage I stole a horse from someone who owed Strauss money, and then immediately after saved a woman's life after a horse fell on her. The duality of man. I suppose. I also started to upgrade the camp, which later in the next chapter resulted in Reverend Swanson stating, "Everyone around here seems happy." Also, this drinking mission with Lenny completely caught me off guard. Again, I mentioned the book is very good at not spoiling anything, so it basically said for this mission, just enjoy it, and I really did. The only tip it really gave me was Lenny can be caught in the act in room 1A, but I'm not sure if I can even show this on YouTube. After this, let's say, formative experience, one of my favorite missions in the entire game is when you journey with Hosea on a little vacation. I did buy a new horse and we camped out under the stars. I could genuinely play a full video game where you just hunt with Hosea. Here we face our first legendary animal of the game, an experience that was way more visceral than I was expecting. Bears in this game are definitely the coolest animal, and as an Australian, I don't often think about bears, but this kind of allowed me to deeply contemplate just how bloody terrifying these monsters are, but also how awe-inspiring their existence is. I mean, I've never experienced one, I only hear kangaroos hopping around at night when camping, but damn, I feel thankful I don't have to worry about them. But this does even go deeper than this. I hunted and hunted and hunted in this game, and it genuinely changed my perception of looking at animals and even plants. To try and get this video out, I was grinding these challenges, and often when leaving the virtual world and entering the real world, I would see a bird and analyze it more carefully. My brain was thinking, what type of bird is this? And then the conditioned gamer part of my brain was thinking, do I need this for a challenge? This was the same for plants as well. I've never experienced a game that gave me more information about the natural world around me. I did choose to kill this bear now, starting my hunt for every legendary animal spotted in these lands. I wasn't rushing through this game at all. I really was playing as intended, indulging in the world, even if this meant just sitting down at a fire and having a chat to a kind man who offered his camp to me. This also refers to when, in a couple minutes later, when we both parted ways and I ran into him again. I tried greeting him and accidentally collided into him, from which he got violent. By no means are we a saint in this chapter, and this specific mission is almost irredeemable from Arthur. He kind of reminds me of a Jaime Lannister or Theon Greyjoy character arc. He literally beats up a sick and dying man who's in a debilitating financial situation. He has a wife and kid to provide for, and Arthur tells him with a pretty uncomfortable tone to sell his wife, which is one of the most tragically foreboding 3 words I've heard in a story for a long time. To me, this mission is the beginning of Arthur Morgan's contemplations, because it's here that he reaches absolute rock bottom, and the game seems to want to make you feel bad about it, through the creation of a very dark and ominous tone when riding back home. This is also another clear intention from Rockstar. The concept of honor is ultimately and thought-provokingly being nudged your way. Around this stage, the book does go into an intended mechanic of gameplay. They name it the sharp shooter technique. Now, it's very simple and very intuitive. You might be doing this naturally, but nonetheless, the strategy is to lock onto an enemy's chest, apply a subtle flick, and then shoot and repeat. The guide states it's a fundamentally simple but hard to master technique, allowing for the alignment of instant headshots. This method definitely works, and in my experience, it's even more overpowered in the original game. Our first optional mission comes in receiving a letter from Mary. We would be missing out on honor, and also we wouldn't be following the guide's canonical flow of missions if we rejected her request. We are given the option to try and rescue her brother, and the honor we receive comes from accepting this. So we save her brother from a cult, who eventually later in the game jump to their death believing their symbol of a turtle will protect them. I should note it's not exactly the same cult, it's actually got a different leader and members, but still, come on, Jenny. I was learning through this chapter that honorable acts in this game lead to rewards. By acts of kindness, reciprocate, revealing a positive and life-inspiring intention of an otherwise dark and miserable game. This chapter is just full of everything. The only downside or negative experience I got from this period of playing was just sometimes I felt almost overwhelmed. It felt like every 10 meters was a new and interesting encounter that I was in a sense forced to engage with because of the book. But just because I was forced in essence doesn't mean that I wasn't absolutely enamored by the lived-in world, and I was totally up for engaging. To me, Mrs. Downs is probably the most important character for Arthur's redemption. We do see her randomly at camp, returning Strauss some of the money that their family owes. It's revealed here that her husband died. She accuses Arthur for speeding up the process. Arthur digresses, stating, "I didn't mean for the fella to die." Strauss uncaringly replies that he was sick, Mr. Morgan, it's not our fault. I think Arthur's reaction here is a subtle repression of sincere regret, which will later manifest into the forefront of Arthur's actions and character. So this sadly happens, Arthur represses it, then the gang robs a train. In, I might add, quite an aesthetic style. It's pretty clear that the gang's actions as outlaws has a direct and controlling effect on Arthur's ability to change, or even see the possibility of change. This is only highlighted further by the next mission where we rob a stagecoach with Micah, who's at the moment the most untrustworthy and rat-adjacent character. Many people die, and for what? Money? Well, personally, I think this really all comes down to faith in someone. A father figure, a best friend. Dutch. Arthur loves and follows Dutch. He's loyal, but to what detriment? Dutch is the leader and carer of the group. He makes the decisions and all must be loyal, or else. Arthur, in good faith, follows his mentor and leader to all sorts of moral paradoxes. His devotion in the end has to be undone to become the honorable man. I actually really like Dutch as a character. He's definitely multifaceted and complex, but he does carry a plague of locusts with him, causing harm to all that happens to be in its path. Of course, I am taking a video game very serious, but it is a very serious video game. Like I said, Rockstar's intentions are quite thought out and inspiring. Also, we gave Bill some hair pomade. With the gang's migration to Horseshoe Overlook, the surrounding area has been impacted disastrously. Leviticus Cornwall, as a businessman, has been robbed and his men killed constantly. The consequences of Dutch's leadership and the gang's actions leads to more destruction and death. But we do manage to escape, and this is where Arthur is actually influenced for good. Whilst on a mission with Charles to find a new hideout for the gang, we stumble upon a German family in a frantic state. Their father was kidnapped the night before. Arthur, in his current mental state of undeviating care for camp and none for others, doesn't want any part of this. But Charles, well, Charles is genuinely a good guy. So we end up helping the family retrieve their father, but here's the catch. We're rewarded with a gold ignet, and also an even better camping ground for the gang. This strange act of kindness seems to sit well with Arthur. This is the start of a much bigger realization. Chapter 3 takes place in a new environment with a much warmer climate. We are unknown to the people of Rhodes, so this time we learn to hide in plain sight by acting as good citizens whilst continuing bad deeds. There's now also special characters to meet in Saint Denis, or Saint Denis, which is what I'm going to call it. There's also some love in the air between rival families, and if we don't help this relationship blossom, we also lose honor. Specifically if we sell Beau's gift rather than give it to Penelope. These characters also lead us into the forefront of a women's suffrage rally that we gladly attend. Arthur notes in his journal that he loved seeing everyone getting pissed off at the feminist movement. Another big aspect of Arthur Morgan's change seems to come from conversation with other members of camp. They serve as almost a confessional or therapy session for Arthur. These girls listen and truly care for him, in a platonic sense, which seems all the more unconditional. This is where Arthur can really conceptualize his meaning and purpose in life. In the conversation with Tilly, he knows all the killing is bad, but he seemed to think this is just who he is. On the other side of these caring ladies is Micah Bell. Whilst at camp, I heard Micah kick a dog. Dude is genuinely a narcissistic psychopath. Chapter 3 was also jam-packed with content. I even met Gavin's friend, probably the funniest and saddest character in the game. But in our pursuit for money in this chapter, the gang falls into various traps reinforcing the idea that it's becoming increasingly more difficult to survive as an outlaw gang in this world. But there's actually another gang even worse off than us, who we can exploit. Delusional ex-Confederates. These guys refuse to accept the Civil War's outcome. We face these Lemoyne Raiders almost constantly within this region. Their Confederate ideology even manifests into even darker and concerning matters. The game, however, constantly makes fun of their existence, and you are even rewarded with honor for killing them. So technically, you're actually intended to do so. And so, I gladly obliged. Another massive highlight for me in this game was robbing the bank in Valentine. As well as just being insanely fun and immersive, robbing this bank can lead to honor. By choosing to crack open the safes quietly rather than to just blow them up with dynamite, you avoid all bloodshed. Up until Valentine finally realized they've been robbed as we escape. This was so much fun. But then, all of a sudden, the tone shifts completely, from ecstasy to dark and foreboding. Arthur just stole $10,000 from a bank, an equivalent of $500,000 today. He gets $2,750 worth of this money, yet still he has the audacity to ask for the debt from the Downs family, even after the husband's death. Arthur justifies this again, as this is just the way the world is. But he even goes further than this. He bothers the Downs boy. He takes this teenager's lack of respect as a personal slight and even maybe a possible threat. which stirs his ego to respond, well, maybe when your mother's finished mourning your father, I'll keep her in black, on your behalf. Think on that, boy. Which is a dark and crude suggestion. He's saying, out of spite of you, I will keep your mother in pain. Arthur from the outset of this game can come off quite charming, but his underlying words and meaning are genuinely kind of horrifying. Imagine someone said that to you. The idea that Arthur is figuratively held down by the gang ultimately comes into full fruition when Micah and Dutch decide to very stupidly trust another gang's invitation for a parlay. Arthur thinks this is obviously a trap, but Micah convinces Dutch to do it anyway. Arthur was right. Combe didn't want a parlay. Instead, he mocks Dutch in front of his face and kidnaps Arthur. The gang's decisions are made impulsively and without any good reasoning, without the genuine care for the other members involved. Arthur suffers, and greatly. Colm keeps him on the borderline of death in hopes Dutch and the gang will come to rescue him, but Dutch never comes. So he must free himself and make a perilous journey back to the camp. I think this is the beginning of some meaningful change. He's already experienced how it feels to help others, but now a lot of the brainwashing by Dutch seems to be coming undone. Through his suffering, Arthur is beginning to see Dutch for who he truly is. It's here that visions begin of either a deer or coyote. When playing, I didn't actually realize that if I wasn't following Arthur's intended path, then dark dreams would be dreamt. We survived this traumatic and enlightening experience, but other members of the group aren't so lucky to avoid the self-destructive nature of the gang. Again, we are ambushed this time in the town of Rhodes, and this time by another enemy we've created, the Grey family, and thus really the town of Rhodes, as the sheriff is a Grey himself. After the battle, Arthur reminisces about Sean. He was like a little brother to Arthur, but things keep getting worse. Jack gets abducted. So Sean died because the Grey family turned on us, and now Jack has disappeared because the Braithwaite family have realized we've been stealing from them. We do strike back at the Braithwaites in very, very cool style. This approach to the manor was dope, but again, this only leads to more death. The gang even kills the Braithwaite sons to try and obtain the knowledge of Jack's whereabouts. Eventually, the matriarch reveals Jack was sold to a man named Angelo Bronte, so we leave her to suffer. But she has lost all. She burns with the manor. Straight after this, two Pinkerton agents funded by Leviticus Cornwall, named Milton and Ross, show up. They give the gang an ultimatum: give up Dutch and then everyone else goes free. The gang stays loyal, and so with the threat of a large Pinkerton raid, we move camps again. This time we take over the large rundown manor that Lenny and I previously cleared out. There are still some Lemoyne stragglers lying about, and some quite eccentric ones too. But ultimately, we have a new home, even if it's decrepit, which is certainly mirroring the state of the gang. Another theme of this game is of change, and St. Denis encapsulates this. But it's interesting because although St. Denis is visually dismal in a kind of biological sense, this change in city also brings change for Arthur. It shows new perspectives and gives Arthur a lot more chance to escape the gang and learn from others. But probably my favorite character apart from Arthur is this nun, Sister Calderon. You only unlock her existence by freeing these captives who the monk wanted us to help. This also represents as an idea that one good deed leads to more good, because Sister Calderon is a very important character in Arthur Morgan's life, and yet she's someone you can completely miss within this amazingly large world. Her words genuinely always warm my heart, because she sees the good in Arthur, which I think really startles him. She refers to him as the most wonderful man, simply because he's helped get her stolen crucifix. We are even rewarded a whole 20+ honor, but there's something even deeper in these optional missions, the real recollection of Arthur's own actions. We are asked by a lady if we want some company, implying you know what. This lady is Edith Downs. This is exactly what Arthur foreshadowed when beating up her husband before his death. Oh, and also, at the beginning of this chapter, we did retrieve Drac from Angelo Bronte. John and I simply did a chore that involved killing some grave robbers, and thankfully Jack wasn't mistreated. Now, he is also another very important character. There is also another mission with Mary that we are free to refuse, considering it deals with her father, who isn't a great man. And it's really of no concern to us, but the right thing and the intended way is to help Mary's father, giving you 10+ honor. After we retrieve the brooch, we give it back to Mary, and she spontaneously invites us to the theatre. I accepted, but I didn't really like the way she treated Arthur, but at the same time, Arthur definitely is in the wrong as well, and he recognizes he's completely at fault. His devotion to the gang is quite stupid. This moment of togetherness reinforces the idea that the gang ended up not being what was promised. It shows him a glimpse into the life he would have had if he stayed with Mary and left the gang in the first place. At the end of their encounter, Arthur is still convinced that the gang are going to get their riches, and he will be free. She believes Arthur will never change. I bought an Black Arabian at this point, and this began my emotional attachment to my horses. There were a few horses who I cherished within this playthrough. The gleam of a wet coat was genuinely one of my favorite sights. Also, we are still in the transition stage of change as a character. So after this storm, when I came across this random train in the dark, it seemed like a very opportunist time to rob it. So I did, which was insanely fun. There's something about this aesthetic that scratches my brain in a very satisfying way. But moving on quite a bit, I met Algernon Wasp, the mayor of St. Denis, robbed a boat, saved an abducted lady, stole a wagon, and many more things occurred this chapter. One kind of cool highlight for me was this interaction with a bounty. Now the book makes it clear with all bounties to make sure they're kept alive. Killing them isn't honorable, but also you can miss out on some pretty funny conversations. This bounty asks us if he can talk to his family one last time. The guide recommends to do so because you will get an increase in honor. Really, he tells his son to alert his friends to ambush me. I also stumbled upon some domestic abuse and gained honor when stopping it. But on the other side of this, you never know if it's just a scheme. For example, I went to help this lady and got holed up in return. This didn't end too well though for my new comrades. Another mistake I made in this playthrough was when we were holding up this trolley station. I accidentally shot this lady, resulting in a loss of honor. This trolley station robbery was just another absolute nightmare for the gang. Again, we were falsely tipped off in the hopes of being caught. We somehow survived an entire St. Denis onslaught only for $45. Oh, and a quarter. Don't forget the quarter. After the time-sensitive coach robbery with Micah, I came across a trap sprung by the Nightfolk. These are a mysterious group, and the game doesn't really define their origin. But man, they are bloody terrifying. From a first-time playing point of view, I really got duped by these guys multiple times, giving me the same visceral feeling of being mauled by a bear. This swampy area in Lemoyne, La Grasse, or whatever you pronounce it, it's pretty damn creepy for many reasons. I completed a lot of miscellaneous tasks in this chapter, as again, the guide recommends if something comes your way naturally, be open to it and engage. Missions fall naturally in rhythm, making this game feel absolutely effortless and always surprising. There's depth and mystery around every corner and honor to be rewarded. But even though I thoroughly and devotionally supported and elevated the camp, this presumably musty old camp isn't the paradise the gang seeks. It's time to take a risk. It's time to rob the biggest bank they can think of. This is the ultimate make it or break it moment. And well, I think it's fair to say they shit the bed. The Pinkertons show up and kill Hosea. John then gets captured and Lenny gets killed. The rest of us only just survive. Hosea's death is definitely sad, but at least he was old and kind of on the verge of death anyway. Lenny's death is genuinely depressing. I really liked Lenny as a character, but we must move on. We are trapped in the city whilst the city watches intently. Dutch does decide here that we should sneak on a boat to escape the country. We are met with some challenges in actually doing this, which results in Charles, one of the most decent members in the gang, sacrificing himself. We hide on the boat until Dutch introduces himself to the crew with some persuasive gold. Every single bad decision Dutch makes, Arthur hurts from it. And on top of this, bad things seem to lead to more bad. The boat they found refuge on then gets hit by a vicious storm. We wake up on the island of Gorma, and this begins chapter 5. Beached and alone, we do end up finding the rest of our so-called friends, but immediately we are captured. Gorma is a very interesting change in the game, which honestly I enjoyed. It just spiced up the visuals and the gameplay a bit. The focus here was just to escape the island by helping some rebels fight against their local tyrant. There aren't any honor moments or really big suggestions or deviations in terms of the intended way of playing the game, but I do feel there are 3 big things that happened whilst on this island. For one, we somehow survived the absolute inevitability of death multiple times. 2, we witnessed Dutch kill an old lady. Not only is Dutch making non-stop poor decisions for the gang, he's also making terrible impulsive ones at a personal level. Arthur is really starting to see through Dutch's posturing of moral superiority, even if he does do a lot of these things in a genuine attempt to better or help the gang. And finally, the first cough. Trust me, I did not think anything about this moment during my playthrough. It was only until I went back to edit could I see just how strong the game foreshadows the future. So after we fight in the war with the rebels, they reward us with a boat back home. So we survived Gorma unshaken. Now it's time for a long ride to find the rest of the surviving camp. That is, if they didn't already disband. We do find a letter at Shady Bell that leads us back to the gang. This includes Charles, who managed to survive his very own sacrifice. In the end, Sadie Adler heralded the camp together and made sure its existence was sustained. Her character is definitely a prominent one in the game. I personally think she's pretty awesome. Javier and Micah also return off screen, and then Dutch arrives, followed by a very moody and kind of stupid Bill. This joy is only fleeting because one of us has just led the Pinkertons straight to the camp. We follow Sadie and eventually get to have some fun. With the battle over, Abigail is distraught because of John's imprisonment. She really does truly love this man. It's funny because Arthur mentions in his journal that he should have married her before she fell so deeply for John. I found the end of this chapter a lot of fun. We need a new location for camp, so we attack the Murphy Brood hideout. I think that's how you pronounce Murphy, I'm not sure. I'll just describe these guys as sadistic, inbred, and bone-chillingly evil. We make sure this traumatized girl is returned to her home, and Arthur really comes out here as a warm and caring presence. The mother is so grateful to see her daughter, she even offers us some money, which I neglected. The intended Arthur has been through enough now to realize the pursuit of money isn't everything. But it's also here that Arthur is reminded of the words he spoke earlier. He just saved a girl's life, being rewarded in return with kindness, whilst just meters away, his despicable acts earlier in the game have manifested to misery and suffering for literally everyone involved. The chapter officially ends with Dutch's partner revealing she ratted them out. She was the reason the Pinkertons knew about the bank robbery. In a sense, she's the reason why Hosea and Lenny died. Even Dutch's love life is causing strain and death in the group. Arthur pleads for Dutch not to kill her, but Susan shoots her anyway. Apparently, snitching is condemned to death by the laws of their own gang. Chapter 6. Now, this in my opinion is the best chapter in the game. The characters that appear are some of my favorites, and the interactions are the most meaningful and life-changing for the character and potentially for the player if they want to make those changes. There are quite a few missions in this chapter that are actually time-sensitive or require high honor, and these missions are some of my favorites in the entire game as well. Chapter 6 begins with Arthur Morgan crashing out and being dragged to a doctor. It's revealed here that he has tuberculosis. This is a diagnosis of impending death. There were no antibiotics developed for TB back in 1899. We walk out into a haze of recollecting voices, and we recognize the deer. We see redemption. I love this moment so much. I can't really write in words just the feeling it gave me, and I can't really play the music because of copyright, but damn. Comically, it's followed up, however, with controlling an air balloon to see if John Marston is incarcerated on this penitentiary island. This is a fun mission, but I feel like it's kind of stupid, possibly the stupidest one. We even end up rescuing Sadie with the balloon, eventually crashing and conveniently skimming a body of water. I really enjoyed the missions with Hamish Sinclair, who's just a genuinely nice bloke. He reminds me of our time camping with Hosea. He does die, sadly, to a boar in the end, something randomly common in fiction that happens to a lot of characters I like. Most of our evil deeds in the early game come from reclaiming debts owed to the gang. Arthur still continues this debt collection, but he's coming to realize these people that tend to borrow money are desperate. They have relationships, families, and grief. In Chapter 6, we get an option in the game to absolve each debt. And so, of course, I did this. For the widow, Arthur doesn't even have an option to reclaim the debt. It's either absolve it or absolve and give her money. The intended way is, of course, to give her the money. Arthur is not only doing these good acts for a sort of redemption before death, he's doing them because he genuinely wants to help. He actually cares. I also had another great chat with Sister Calderon. Her dialogue is so damn moving. Every time I hear her talk, I begin to almost tear up. Her speech motivates us to donate to the poor. Sadie and I then rescue John without Dutch's approval. We save him as a duo in very dramatic fashion. But this annoys Dutch, who's starting to feel like Arthur's loyalty is slipping. When riding my horse back out of the camp after this interaction, I was completely thrown off guard by a literal wagon on fire. I wrote in my notes, absolutely surreal and exhilarating. It's bloody insane how big this game is. One of the more darker, and probably the darkest moments I had when traveling amongst the land, was when I ran into this guy who had a woman hogtied on his horse. He states it's none of our business because it's a family affair. I kill him obviously and free the lady. She states he hasn't done anything right by her ever since she was 6. This game really does venture into some dark territory, and it's a bit bizarre that this was my final act that led me to having the highest honor possible. Literally 5 minutes after this, my next mission was the high honor sensitive quest. We are finally going to do right by Mrs. Downs, after all the suffering we've caused her. She understandably wants absolutely nothing to do with us. She thinks we are seeking forgiveness, but really Arthur's gotten to the stage where he just simply wants to help. He learns Archie, her son, is basically killing himself by working in the coal mine, so he rocks up to help him. Arthur does this by beating up his co-workers who are mocking Archie because of his mother's occupation. We give him money, but he can't leave this town without his mother, who's continuing to sell her body. So we help him by going out into the woods where she is being confronted by a very creepy patron. We save her from this chilling engagement and give her a ride back to her son. She says something just as powerful as something Sister Calderon would say. Then all you can do now is decide to be the man you want to be for the time you have left. Help someone who can still be helped. These words definitely resonate with Arthur, and from here on out, Arthur truly becomes a good person. He gives them more money, stating he's not looking for forgiveness. It ain't about that, don't forgive me, just take the money and get out of here. It's crazy that you could play this entire game, and if you don't have high honor, you can never partake in this mission that's so incredibly deep and foundational to the very core of the game. Even with this completely captivating and engrossing main story at the forefront of this chapter, there's also just tons and tons to do. And it's really cool how each interaction seems to be connected to helping in some sense and Arthur's character. In this helping, there's nothing truly in it for Arthur. We are simply helping others who can be helped and killing those threatening the lives of the honest. I did also stumble upon a really cool wild encounter, where a hunter was tracking a bear and eventually got mauled to death by it. Epic stuff. But you know what's even more epic? My love for Sister Calderon. We meet her for the final time at Emerald Rand Station. She won't appear unless you met her during the game, otherwise Reverend Swanson will show up instead. I'm not sure if you have low honor if Reverend Swanson appears rather than Sister Calderon, I'm not sure. But anyway, I got the intended cutscene, and this is one of my favorite pieces of dialogue in all of the fiction I've ever consumed. And I think it's the most powerful scene in the entire game. It's here that Arthur reveals that he's sick, and that he once had a son who died, and so they contemplate death. Arthur is scared, but the sister ensures him that there is absolutely nothing to fear. Take a gamble that love exists, and do a loving act. We are now coming to the climax of the story, and so naturally many characters are exiting the game, whilst Dutch somehow continues to ruin more lives. At this stage, he's enraging the natives into a battle in an effort to draw attention away from the gang. These missions were really exciting and exhilarating. At least we can say that our loyalty to Dutch hasn't resulted in, let's say, an adventurous life. But again, for his misgivings, we are the ones clearing up his mess. Charles and I infiltrate Fort Wallace and rescue Eagle Flies in another dark adventure. A man in our current state of near death really is making a sacrifice here, sacrificing himself not for absolution. We also have to make another honor-based decision when coming across Sadie Adler at camp. Do we help her take out the O'Driscolls for good, the gang who killed her husband and took her house? At this stage, if you don't help Sadie Adler, I'd be very concerned. The game really does steer you to do the right thing. Helping Sadie results in 20 plus honor. But again, the gang is becoming more and more split. Sadie and John are on our side, whilst Micah and his aesthetically immoral friends were Dutch. From the gang's influence, Eagle Flies has been spurred into complete war with the army. Rainfalls, his father, tries to stop another attack going forth, but in the end, Dutch is glad to join the natives in battle in the hopes of some plunder. This is very epic, but it's also just sad where things have gotten to. Dutch and I retrieve some bonds he so conveniently was after, and when exiting we are pursued by some more men. This is the complete disillusion of Dutch's character. Arthur is faced with almost certain death unless Dutch intervenes. But what does he do? He leaves his son, brother, and friend. We only survive because of the foolish heroism of Eagle Flies, and as a consequence, he is fatally shot. Dutch inadvertently killed him by influencing this revolution. He then denies that he just left us, but we have more important things to attend to right now. Eagle Flies dies in the hands of his father. All of Rainfall's sons have died. A complete tragedy. As we ride back to the gang, we are seized by a coughing fit and pass out. We are only saved and rescued by the very kindness of others, specifically of the German family Charles and I helped out at the end of chapter 2. Again, emphasizing a kind deed should not be done for a kind deed in return, but rather things usually are just more inclined that way. We also find out here that the bonds we helped steal are worth $6,000, but as of now, it's all the gang's share. There is a home robbery that we can do now that is another, you guessed it, highlight of the game for me. In the guide, this interaction doesn't appear in the stranger missions, rather it's noted as a home robbery because if you help this lady out with kindness, then you're free to take whatever you want. But of course, at this stage of the game, as we're very sick, on the verge of death, I do refuse these offerings. She's a city girl whose husband just died, and so she's learning how to survive in the country. We teach her, giving her the essential skills to live and prosper. Their relationship is very wholesome. It's purely platonic, but it's almost romantic. The two cared greatly for each other, and this simple kiss on the cheek is the surprise and kindness Arthur gets in return for his kind acts. This is arguably greater than all the gold he's been looking for his whole life. I also noticed when visiting her that she lives in a very stormy area. Whenever I was up this way, I'd usually run into some rain and lightning. The last mission, well technically the last two missions, start with the recognition of the camp's abandonment. Most members have left by now, but to no surprise, Dutch is still planning another big robbery that if they do manage to pull off, will lead to riches that will allow them to finally escape this wretched land. Arthur says he will help them, but under one condition. John and his family are free to leave the gang with their earnings from the robbery. Arthur wants to help those who can be helped, but Dutch's ego is very offended by this request. He does agree nonetheless though. We rob the train in epic fashion, John and I as a duo. But things ended up getting out of hand, and because of this, the gang's momentarily distracted and John is shot. We end up robbing the rest of the train in a very similar fashion to that of the original game, and we steal an unfathomable amount of money from the train's safe, jumping off just before it falls down into the gap. This gap that me and John created earlier in the game. We have the money, but Arthur's misery only grows. Dutch has just revealed John did not make it. On riding back to the camp, we run into Tilly and Jack. It's funny because her name is Tilly Jackson and Jack is a son. Okay, I'm weird. But anyway, she informs the guys that Abigail was captured by the Pinkerton agency. Arthur obviously wants to help rescue her, but everyone but Sadie seems to think this is a waste of time. This is another huge betrayal in the story that sets up the next game perfectly. We part, making sure to give Tilly some money before we go. Sadie and I then attempt to rescue Abigail in Annesburg, but this only goes so far until Agent Milton checkmates us. He reveals Micah has been helping him ever since Gorma. Micah is the rat. We managed to survive Milton's embrace with Abigail's help, but we now have to tell her about John's likely death. She's obviously distraught, but these three kind of have a shared moment of goodness. I don't know, this just really spoke out to me. Arthur speaks highly of these ladies, he calls them the best. Abigail responds by revealing a key with the information to a chest, Dutch's chest. We then ride back to Beaver Hollow in the most emotional and dramatic fashion. Because I have high honor, I get a recollection of all the kind and meaningful words spoken, whilst a sentimental song plays. On revealing Micah is a rat to Dutch, Micah accuses us of lying and being the true rat. John then randomly comes out of the bushes stating Dutch left him to die, and Susan sides with us only to die. Dutch, heavily confused, doesn't know who to trust, us or Micah. Eventually, he throws away the deep and meaningful connection that Arthur and him once had. Luckily though, the Pinkertons momentarily distract the gang's inner conflict. We escape through the back of the cave, and John thanks us for everything we've done for him and his family. It's here that Arthur tells John to not look back, further adding to John's progression throughout these games. But again, we are pursued by the gang, with the Pinkertons continuing to interrupt. Through this wild commotion, our horses are actually killed, which was pretty damn sad for me. I had this horse ever since chapter 4, but finally we are here. The very moment of redemption, the intended choice. We can either help John get back to safety or return for the money. Obviously, because all this was my first time playing the game and the book doesn't spoil anything, I didn't know what the outcome of these decisions would actually be. I had a sneaky suspicion John was an important character because of the poster that shows up when you start the game, but I really didn't know if this was almost a trick question. At the same time, it's very obvious that following the intended way of playing, I should help John, because helping is always good, and we do gain a whole rank of honor for this choice. Rockstar doesn't reward you on doing good, but rather just deciding you want to do good. The decision is what gives you the honor. So I did help John escape, strengthening our brotherhood. In the end, we have to force him to leave us in order for our ultimate selfless act. The thing is, I essentially got to play this game for the first time twice. When I went back to edit this video, I found myself just watching, but this time in the form of what felt like a movie. An incredible movie. Micah is certainly an unredeemable character, but something about his full conviction, his utter belief in nothingness, is moving nonetheless. He fights to survive, very much at the same modern day essence of, we started from the bottom, now we're here, I suppose. Obviously in a much more perverted and dangerous manner. Arthur, on the other hand, represents togetherness, unity. These two representations of character fight an epic and hair-raising battle. Eventually Dutch intervenes, only to leave both of them. He's become a shell of himself, unsure of what to believe in anymore. Micah leaves us in a guttural rage, and Arthur dies peacefully with the blessing of the sun's warmth. He was redeemed. What an incredible story. I want to thank my friend Lewis for the recommendation because damn, wow, that was crazy. But it's not finished yet. The game has an unexpected epilogue. I mean, I did know the game had an epilogue, I just had no idea that Arthur was gonna die and that you played John in it. Like, I knew Arthur was going to die, but some weird part of me was really hoping he wasn't, and that maybe he'd be able to survive the rest of the game. I didn't think he was gonna die so bloody quick. But it is a very well done transition by Rockstar into another character. So, it's been some years and John is trying to be a better husband and father. He's taken the advice from Arthur that he needs to change his ways and leave the outlaw life. But this grim world and his past keeps pulling him back in. Thankfully, he is very helpful to have around, so he begins his ranching days. On a beautiful bit of land, I might add. Seriously, what were the gang wasting their time with for so long? Eventually, Abigail does leave John because he can't seem to help himself from getting involved in fighting and killing. John does fully come into his own here. He develops into someone who devotes all his time, effort, and resources into making Abigail's dreams come true, ultimately to win his family back. This epilogue is very mundane in some places and very exhilarating in others. So this game is still full and rich as ever, which is insane considering how many bloody hours I'd already put into the game. Eventually we do win back the family, although John is still learning to be a better father, especially in reference to Jack's hobbies of reading and writing. So what about honor for John? Well, there are two honor situations in the epilogue, giving the house squatters money to leave rather than resorting to violence, and not choosing to hang Cleet. Something I found really cool about the intended way to play this game was in the way that the game shows killing is not always as fun as gaining a nice compliment. These house squatters were actually quite nice and grateful, and I found it even more entertaining than if I were to shoot them. Sadie, who's now a bounty hunter, Uncle, who's still a drunk, and Charles, who bros for money, all good company, help us to invest into the ranch and build it. This epilogue was actually pretty massive. We end up proposing and marrying Abigail, which was very sweet and joyful, and then vengeance was sought, the final mission in the game. With the learnt knowledge of the old gang's whereabouts, Sadie, Charles, and John stormed the snowy mountain. This is what I would guess as the biggest onslaught in the game. And many concerning and problematic events occur whilst climbing this figurative and literal mountain to finally kill Micah and end the days of being an outlaw. The guy does suggest shooting this lantern, which makes Micah move, initiating the final dialogue with these characters. Sadie catches Micah unawares, but then Dutch catches us unawares. Micah gets control of Sadie's gun, and now it's a 2-on-1. Dutch still seems to be a shell of himself, completely unsure of anything. He ends up shooting Micah, never stating why. He saves our life, from which I finish Micah's. Dutch again just walks away, nothing spoken, leaving his chest full of gold behind. The game ends on a very happy note. Arthur will be remembered, but now is the time for the surviving characters to enjoy their riches, but most importantly each other with the freedom of escaping the outlaw life. Unfortunately, darkness does watch from a distance as Agent Ross begins his investigation and moves to take control of the Marston family. This is the end, but also a new beginning. Now we are free to explore the world in its absolute entirety. After completing the full main story, I was 84% through total completion, but in reality, I've got about 80 to 90 hours to go, because I just didn't play for total completion. I was enjoying the game so much that I pretty much finished the book apart from the compendium. For example, for total completion, you only need to kill 5 legendary animals. I killed them all, and that carries over now with all the rest of these challenges. I did all the bounty hunting listed in the book, and etc. Now, I'm not trying to boost my own ego here, I just genuinely had a lot of fun following the book, and I got lost in it. The guide explains this part of the game pretty well. Red Dead Redemption 2 will never leave you at a loose end with nothing to do. This is a game where you could happily spend hours upon hours simply moving from one place to another just to marvel at vistas or peer at fine details. But when you can tear yourself away from the signs, sounds, and sheer atmosphere, there are countless activities to get involved with. So because there's an overwhelming amount left to do in the game, What I did was follow the book from page to page. If something came up around me, I still interacted with it in the intended way, but really most of this was quite linear because I'd completed most of the stuff that kind of comes up randomly. Also, outside of just attaining 100% completion, I did follow the guide to gather many rare items, visit different points of interest, and even complete in a little mini game with a stuffed squirrel in the family home. But I'll get to all this later. Firstly, I began my somewhat guided exploration with horses. There are 3 extremely rare types of wild horses in the game. 2 of these are shown on a map in the book, the White Arabian and the Tiger-Striped Bay Mustang. The third one is the Splashed White American Paint. This specimen does not have a set location. Instead, it randomly spawns at ambient campfires around the world, where hostile campers await. There are also other very rare horses that are wrangled later in the game. But still, because the guide noted how rare these are, I went on a journey to find them. And well, the White Arabian was very easy to find, and for me, it was a very beautiful and atmospheric moment. The Tiger-Striped Bay Mustang, on the other hand, was tough as hell. Genuinely, it took me hours and hours and hours to find this breed. Eventually, I found him rolling around in the dirt, and he became mine. This horse is very dope. For the absolute rarest horse in the game, as stated by the book, the Splash White American Paint, I didn't go looking around for a bunch of ambient campfires. Instead, I just gambled that on my luck, I'd randomly come across this rare breed in the wild. Towards the very end of my playthrough, I actually did, and this horse ended up being my second favorite horse in the game. Something about its colors reminded me of a great white shark, and I just loved that. The guide states that in addition to all the standard creatures that populate the world, there are also a number of unique specimens called legendary animals. These are hard to find and in most cases extremely dangerous. Hunting them is therefore very challenging, but leads to unique rewards that can be used to craft valuable items. In following the guide's map, I killed every legendary animal in the game, something I found really fun. One issue I did come across was for the last and final animal, the legendary panther. You need to complete the Master Hunter challenges to even unlock its existence. So quickly I became a Master Hunter. This required skinning 3 bears, killing 5 cougars with just a bow. This one specifically led to some insane experiences. Truly, the variability in this game is crazy. And with these Master Hunter challenges complete, I can finally take out the legendary panther, which we give to the trapper to make into a sort of stylish cloak. This whole experience with the legendary animals and the master hunting challenges was so fun and exciting for me. I really enjoyed this part of the game a lot. And it only gets better. Each fish species in the game has a single legendary specimen, the largest and most difficult to catch of its kind. The search for these legendary fish officially begins when you speak to Jeremy Gill. He will give you a map showing the location of 13 legendary fish and ask you to send them to him by mail once you have caught them all. The guide notes that there is, however, a technique that will greatly help you to win these contests. Every time the fish is tired out, don't simply reel in as normal, instead tilt downward to pull your rod up and then quickly reel in. After a second or two, do this again, pulling up and reeling in. I absolutely adore this challenge. It's not so much about catching the fish, but rather the peaceful scenery of the world. Sunrises, sunsets, storms. It really was a fun time catching all of these fish. And whilst all this fishing was happening, in between journeys, so much stuff is occurring within the world. It just keeps going and going. With all the legendary species sent to Jeremy, we go out with him fishing and he gets pulled under, never to be seen again. There are a total of 90 challenges that we have to overcome to reach 100% completion. We've already done the first 10 Master Hunter challenges, which leaves us with 80 more to go. These challenges guide you through all aspects of the gameplay, in very interesting and unique ways. They force you to loosen up and have some fun. For the most part. Some are actually quite brutal, and in total these challenges took me something like a week to beat. The bandit challenges were probably my favorite. They allow you to completely let go and forget all morals and ethics. Now, I'm aware that we are playing as John and he's just turned his back on being an outlaw, but considering the story's done and we are just exploring now, I kind of let morals slide out the window. I mean, I literally had to complete the game and the guide. I won't cover every challenge in the game, but I do think it's worth going over all the bandit challenges. These include holding up 5 townsfolk, robbing 2 coaches, robbing cash registers, amassing a $250 bounty, stealing horses, robbing townsfolk some more, stealing wagons, hog tying and leaving people to die on the railroad, and completing 5 train robberies without dying or being caught. Also, I should note during this whole experience, whilst I was stealing the horses, I came across Aberdeen Farm, which was another pretty intense experience. These characters are brother and sister, and although horrid, their character design and dialogue is so interesting to me. They do try to rob and kill us, but we survive to enact revenge and get our money back. You can't rob a bandit. The guide also highlights any notable chests or lockboxes laying about. Next on the page is the Explorer challenges. Our goal here is to find 10 treasures. If we find maps, these also count as one treasure. I enjoyed this, it was fun, but although the book recommends figuring the clues out without its guidance, I ended up giving in every single time. I had no clue how to solve these maps, like I didn't know where I was actually looking at. Fortunately, the guide does go over everything if you do suck at this kind of stuff like me. The thing I like the most about this challenge is just the exploring aspect. The game is incredibly immersive whilst camping out in the wilderness. Now I have to learn how to become a degenerate gambler. A lot of these gambler challenges actually make it so it's pretty much pure luck and very little skill. Some do require some gambling knowledge. I do enjoy blackjack and poker myself, but my luck at these tables were horrendous. One time I played at the same poker table throughout the day, into the night, the next morning, and until noon. One bloke was just stealing money from me. But I do really like how the game emphasizes the kind of detriment nature of gambling. Some blokes would say just one more and then be at the table for hours on end. Next was the herbalist challenges. And look, this was kind of painful and insufferable, but at the same time, it's weirdly wholesome and comforting. This game really isn't a high dopamine type of game for me. It didn't really seem addictive. I didn't completely neglect the rest of my life playing. And like I said, I feel like it actually helped me connect to nature even more. Though I can't say I've been out in the bush looking for any mushrooms or herbs of late. You do have to pick one of each species of herb and season and cook all 11 types of meat, which was quite time consuming. The horseman challenges were a breath of fresh air in comparison. The only mildly annoying challenges were riding from Van Horn to Blackwater in less than 17 minutes without touching any water, and also breaking every wild horse breed in the game. Actually, that last challenge was kind of annoying. I also didn't come across any horse I particularly liked during the process of finding all the breeds. So I went out and got my favorite horse in the entire game. I actually came across this guy from YouTube, so I've said it 10 times already this video, but really I'm using it as a strategy to try and show more of my experience. What I'm going to say is, when going back to write the script, I just can't fathom how much stuff occurred within this playthrough. Like, I'm doing the challenges, and at the same time, so much meaningful and interesting encounters are still occurring, even after the entire main game's complete. I really want to highlight this stranger who I just randomly came across camping out under the stars. He offered his fire to me, so I sat and listened whilst his drunk words spoke much wisdom. Like, I'm not joking, this conversation has stuck with me. He's contemplating hell for his actions. He was paid good money by the government to pen Indians up like cattle. He watched many die slow deaths and even contributed to directly killing them himself. The nugget of wisdom he gives us during his monologue of utter self-hatred is, money doesn't last long. It's what you do that sticks around. He's desperately trying to repress these memories. He still sees their faces as clear as yesterday. I just let him be. This horse, which I eventually named Tully, was my favorite horse in the game. One time he actually got severely injured, and I was out of horse revivers. I was really spooked because I didn't have enough ingredients to make another revive either, so in the cold small hours, I ran back whilst high on cocaine, all the way back to Valentine to reach the doctor's, from which I stole a horse and made my way back to my beloved. The sharpshooter challenges were also very easy, but some were kind of weird and required a bit of googling to find out how they're even possible. I also made some pretty bad mistakes here, and my honor really began to suffer because of these challenges. The survivalist challenges were really fun. Most of them involved some form of fishing, and the final challenge required catching every species of fish in the game. I found this exciting, even though standing around doing nothing in a video game might be considered boring. And finally, the weapons expert challenges. These were nice and quick and easy, for the most part. I did get into some trouble with the law sometimes. The final challenge was to kill a grizzly bear without taking damage, only using throwing knives. The challenges cover everything, which I think is why I kept enjoying this game more and more. Reaching 100% in the game is almost like a guide into all the possible cool things you can do. Also, I should just take a step back here. The guide says when pursued by the law, that your best choice is to simply escape without increasing your bounty or risking death. For these challenges, I did abuse the unlimited city guards, but once I finished, I was out of there quick. And just a note, I've just had a bigger look back at the gameplay, and holy crap, the weapons expert challenges were a lot more intense than I remember. I probably played this a month and a half ago from when I'm writing this, so I just forgotten slightly. Oh, and also, we are rewarded the Legend of the East outfit, giving us a ton of bonuses to our stats. Early in the game, Arthur reclaimed a debt from the struggling family. The father was an alcoholic who we killed. Going back years later, the son is taking up the father's habit. Again, reiterating, evil begets evil. It's now that I finish off all the robberies in the game. First, I did the ones given to us by Alden and Hector. Personally, I like Alden the most, and I think he likes us back. There are some cool shop robberies that are a bit hidden. I did the Rhodes gunsmith earlier with the poor abused man. By the way, he was dressed this way because this freak had lost his son, and so he tried to replace him with an adult. Weird and creepy, I know. Then we have the St. Denis gunsmith, where we rob an illegal poker game. The guide tells you to interrogate these guys further, so they will open a safe for you. Then we have the Strawberry General Store, where the owner keeps a wine cellar in his basement and some money in his wall. And finally, we rob the back of the Doctor at Valentine, where some O'Driscolls are running an illicit operation. Watts's cabin was also quite the experience to rob. From the words straight out of the guide, initially its only occupant is an elderly woman who mistakes you for someone else and allows you to enter the back rooms without complaint. Climb down the ladder and reach the cellar where a weapon awaits. The semi-auto shotgun. On a subsequent visit, you will hear the woman and her 4 sons arguing inside the cabin. If you try and enter, they will attack you immediately. Eliminate them and you'll be able to loot the entire house. If you never kill the woman, you will find her decaying in the bed during the epilogue. Also, as John, I went back to the widow, as this does count as a home robbery. We tell her we're a friend of Arthur and she tells us we can take anything we want. Even after all these years, she still thinks of Arthur fondly. I then became a notorious bounty hunter all around the world. I even saw some hangings, one of which I think was someone I brought to the sheriff. Some of these were easier than others, but for the most part, I just had some more adventurous fun. I'd completed most stranger missions already at this stage, but there were a few left, all of them randomly being very intriguing. I really enjoyed the mission with Professor Dragic, where we used electricity to bring a robot to life, which I'm pretty sure killed him because later the guide shows us where the robot is now located. Also, the lantern we acquired from the mission changes brightness based on what direction the robot is from the lantern. Another great character was Evelyn Miller, who ends up working himself to death. And now finally, the last stranger mission, the murder mystery mission, where a serial killer has left clues all around the map. This leads us to a bunker, which we unlock with the full given solution, only to be frightened and hit on the head. We end up overcoming the psycho dweeb, and so we take him to the Valentine Sheriff. And that's the very last stranger mission in the game. We are coming close to an end. The guide now goes over the gunslingers, which was pretty easy, relaxing, and immersive. A good little story on its own. There really isn't too many ways you can really go about this. There's no real choices, just good old-fashioned gunslinging. I did buy a Turkoman at this point in the playthrough, as I realized I'd been getting too attached to my horses, resulting in me only having like 5 throughout this whole playthrough. I did like this horse a lot. Moving on to the cigarette cards, I did find many of them specifically in the locations where 2 are found next to each other, but the guide does say you can just buy packets of cigarettes, and so I did end up doing that. I spent a small fortune, but it cut down the time to do this significantly. Though, like I said, I did actually find quite a lot of them, specifically if I knew they'd lead me into foreign territory, something new. Now, you might think I've done everything hard in the game. Well, collecting all the exotics for Algernon Wasp was ridiculous to say the least. I don't really have much else to say other than that. It's a part of the game that's just a pure grind. And I swear these rare birds, which are beautiful, become rarer when this challenge begins. But maybe I'm just whinging. Algernon pays us very well in rewards, and we get his gun and a hat fashioned by the artist himself. I then got myself my own eccentric horse and headed off to find all the dinosaur bones around the world. Fortunately for all the challenges where you have to find a lot of stuff like the exotics and like these dinosaur bones, the guide actually shows you exactly where they are on the map. I suppose this could be considered laborious, but with the book it actually was quite enjoyable. Even though by now I'd traveled to most regions of the world already, before reaching every new bone location, I was excited to see what would show up next. We do give their whereabouts to the lady who requested them, and she ends up inviting us to her new creation. She believes it's a real species of dinosaur. I'm just impressed she managed to put it all together, to be honest. Also, whilst I was out hunting the bones, I did randomly find Otis Miller's treasure. This contains his revolver and a bunch of other goods. Rock carvings. Now, this is a very similar quest to the dinosaur bones. Though this time it starts with a man with a big facial birthmark and red hair, and ends with a baby with a big facial birthmark and red hair. This Francis Sinclair asks us to locate 10 rock carvings around the world, and to send them the coordinates. If you look closely, I don't really know what we see, other than the fact that when everything is put together, it shows some relation to the concept of change in time. Francis Sinclair is a time traveler, I presume. The hunting request was for me just as difficult as the exotics. You have to get perfect kills on specific animals, most of which are quite rare. This was the challenge that really warped my brain whenever I went for a walk or just sat outside. We have a lot of small birds around where I live, and every time just any bird flew over my head, I would find myself looking closely trying to identify with whether or not I needed it for a hunting request. Our reward for doing all this work, and I do say work for a reason, is an invitation from the lady putting out the requests. Oh, and we do get money throughout the process. This lady is very eccentric and a bit nutty, but honestly, I kind of like her. It's weird what she's doing, but I kind of see the vision. However, if this was real life, I'd probably be out of there in a second. But we do get our most prized reward here, the stuffed squirrel. You can place it above the fireplace at home, but Abigail will question our undeniable great taste in art. And on subsequent returns back to home, people, probably Abigail, moved the squirrel. One time she even hid it in the bloody chimney. The dream catchers was another quick and easy task the book takes us through. It didn't take long at all, and we are rewarded with an ancient arrowhead. At this point, I did use the guide to find some loot that's pretty tough to find. This derailed train was definitely the hardest thing to reach in the entire game. John has to do some pretty hardcore parkour to reach it. There is also just some more free gold I found around the world, and not to mention this is when I found the actual rarest horse in the game, the Splash White American Paint. But for now, it's time for a complete overhaul of our style. Now it's time to face the rest of the remaining gangs. I started with Shady Belle and the Lemoyne Raiders, then I visited Hanging Dog Ranch to take out the RDR2's gang, then I, as Death himself, journeyed far down towards Thieves Landing to face the Del Lobos, then up and down New Austin to clear more of them out. This includes Fort Mercer, which is an important location for the next game, that I am about to move on to. But first, I must state, going after the gangs with no guilt whatsoever was so much fun. Special characters is another aspect of the game that isn't needed to 100% the game, but the guide does go over these encounters and I thought they would be interesting to investigate. We have Agnes Dowd, a literal ghost who died tragically at a very young age. We have a Chelonian cult recruiter in the city of St. Denis. We have the Armadillo town crier, Blind Man Cassidy, this cave hermit. He's a very weird character. The Chelonian master who jumps off the cliff. Captain Russell, who thinks the Civil War is still going on. The constipated man. The suffragette, who I must admit is shockingly annoying when trying to buy clothes at the tailor. Dr. McIntosh, who thinks the new craze for dental hygiene going around will make our pets homosexual. We have a eugenics proponent, who if we kill, we lose no honor because nobody cares. I did mess up here because I accidentally disturbed the peace by missing my first shot. We of course also have Gavin's friend, then a pretty bizarre special character came to my attention, the giant. Now I thought I was actually going to come across a real giant in the game, but he does hide behind this rock in this cave. He talks to us kindly enough, but the weirdest thing by far is how you unlock his interaction. You have to go to the native Indian reserve, and once these strange looking birds take flight, we have to follow them all the way up here. There is no way in hell I would have known about this without the book. We have the hermit, the homeless vet Mickey, Joe Butler, John. He's a real piece of work. And if you just wait around him long enough, he will begin to fight you. He's one of the toughest brawls, like genuinely it took me forever to take this guy out. Even innocent bystanders started to get in my way, and things got really intense. It makes a lot of sense to do all this stuff after the main story, especially because accidents happen in these encounters and honor is lost. We also have the drunk aging writer, who's a bizarre and quite depressing character. Of course, there's the mad preacher, the sun worshipper, the soothsayer, the robot, a reverend, this guy called Poor Joe who lives in a tree, Timothy Donahue, who sold me a get rich quick book for $50. I didn't get rich quick, so when I found him again, I forcefully took my money back. And finally, we have the new tumbleweed sheriff and Sonny. Sonny is the absolute freak who kidnaps you, and he actually caught me totally off guard like halfway through the game. I didn't know what the hell happened, and I never got my revenge until much later in the game when I finally realized you could. He freaked me out when I first came across him, so this time I caught him off guard and took my revenge. It's finally at about this stage where the game starts slowing down a bit. I still come across a lot of new stuff, but I've beaten most of the game now. There's just a lot of stuff still hidden in plain sight. All I needed now was some more weapons to reach 50 collected. I also found some other pretty cool masks and such things. But before I fully end the game and find all of the gang's graves, I wanted to visit what the guide claimed were points of interest. It also shows cabins of note. How I could get this far into the game and still be stunned and in awe of the detail is ridiculous. You can't really interact with these points of interest other than to just jot down their location. But this only adds to their weird mystery. I don't even know what this is. I saw a UFO, I saw death, everywhere it seemed, even death by a meteorite strike, a meteorite that I can pick up. I saw a big ass meteorite, and I saw a meteorite shower. I saw a tiny little church, an abandoned town, someone chained up dead inside an outhouse, little stories of love and cheating gone wrong, and just a bunch of weird stuff. Even a bloody Viking helmet and hatchet at this ancient burial. I could go on, and I'm actually going to. This sculpture puzzle and its solution counterpart, a hobbit hole, more specifically a turtle house, a dead girl in a barrel. I also came across a weird as glitch here, a meditating monk, a sculptured piece of art, two boys who were told by their mother not to leave the house no matter what, as she won't be long, mammoth bones, a frozen man, another frozen man, this time from a different century, a treehouse, a crazy old rotten hermit of a woman, a plane crash, a creepy one at that, a bear that entered the back of this cabin, this one's particularly random and intense, giant bones, a native burial, an obelisk with a new treasure map, a pagan ritual with a mask, trees with faces, whale bones, a Native American camp, a chest in a well, a wreckage containing some pretty bad energy, a ranch with a lot of what looks like donkey bones, but then a woman or a thing who died in the act of labor. This is a donkey lady, which is very disturbing. Another wreckage, some more whale bones, a missionary's corpse, a Civil War hat, a tricon hat, an abalone shell fragment, and I think that's it for now. It's time to visit the graves and finish beating Red Dead the intended way. But even still, I'm getting duped by the game. Like genuinely, how insane is this? I wear my best mourning attire and visit Jenny's grave, a lady who died before the game began. Davy, who died in the very first scene of the story. Sean, Arthur's figuratively speaking little brother. Kieran Duffy, the former O'Driscoll turned friend. Poor old Lenny and Hosea, two characters who no doubt would have stood by Arthur and John's side. Eagle Flies, Susan Grimshaw, and our very own Arthur Morgan. I'm not kidding, visiting his grave is the literal last thing I did in order to 100% this game. What a bittersweet ending. But still, there are some things the guide recommends doing after you've beaten the game, such as visiting the Braithwaite Manor to collect some of the gold we were after for so long, returning to Micah's body to spit on his face and take his weapon, visiting Micah's old camp where a bunch of his old remnants remain. I also wanted to just keep exploring for a bit. I had this treasure map and I wanted to find the gold that was actually proving quite easy to recognize and solve this time. Speaking of solving, the book recommends revisiting the sculptures as you can find a pattern here that will unlock some gold. The puzzle is all about a missing arm off one of the sculptures and the finger count on each sculpture. If both hands or fingers added up to a prime number, I pressed in on the statue. After doing this for all prime fingered sculptures, I got rewarded with some gold. There's also a whiskey tree with a gold nugget inside one of the bottles. The last page of the book goes over some miscellaneous stuff which I found very interesting, such as this witch's cauldron. I actually drank out of it and ended up passing out, waking up just meters from it. There's an alchemy house that blows up, a very concerning scene in the Guthrie farm. I'm not entirely sure I can show this on YouTube, but there's a black sheep and a guy with his pants down. Yeah. And lastly, and probably my personal favorite, some whispering trees to the south of Brandywine Drop. But who cares about all of this? Who cares that revisiting Arthur Morgan's grave was the very thing to complete 100%? Because all that matters is I beat the game. I played for so long that the constipated man got kicked out of his hotel room, which would make absolute sense considering the amount of days and money he probably spent on that toilet, or maybe, just maybe, he actually took a poo. So with this out of the way, we can move on to Red Dead Redemption. Now, I'm not going to dwell too long here. I did kind of have a similar experience with this game in terms of the start. It really wasn't living up to my high expectations, and then by the end, I was basically crying. I got very attached to these characters, especially because of Red Dead Redemption 2. Another surprising thing considering how old this game is at its core, it's the very same, like nearly identical, same underlying system of gameplay of Red Dead 2. Bar the camping and self-preservation. But the stranger missions and how the game is set out is so ridiculously similar. But really, I played this game to see what happens to John after Red Dead 2. Initially, John and his family are detained for their previous outlaw life, which we kind of saw at the end of Red Dead 2, but the government has given John an ultimatum. Catch the old members of the gang, especially Dutch, and you and the family go free. So considering we already know how much John cares about his family, He goes all out in working for the government. Meanwhile, he's basically surrounded by devils, except for a few characters. Again, the world is dark and cruel, specifically towards women in this game. Like, I'm not having a go at Rockstar at all, there's no need to, I'm just saying what it is. A lot of bad men doing a lot of bad things in this game. And John is honestly a very good man in comparison, especially at this point in his story. He just wants his family back. And eventually, we do stop Javier, Bill, and Dutch. Dutch's death. Oof. Now, that was just sad. He realized a paradox, the defining issue with himself. In life, things can never be forced to change, but his self-identity is all about forcing change. If nothing can change, Dutch cannot change. Honestly, I'm quite sad thinking about Dutch's death. He did some bad things and showed some deep character flaws, but I think deep down he got irritated and overwhelmed. I think in this game and towards the end of the last, he realized how much he got caught up in his own fragile ego and how much he really did wrong, especially to his good pal Arthur Morgan. So Agent Ross, after all these years, he's finally got his man, and now we can see our family again. There is a massive difference between John in the epilogue of Red Dead 2 and now. He's finally become a good husband and father. The most defining moment and something that makes me deeply emotional is close to the very end of the game. When doing our ranching duties, we witness a train being robbed. We, as John, have the opportunity to intervene, but I don't. Thus, John doesn't, and this is the fulfillment of his arc. He is finally completely out of that life, the life he's left. He's a rancher with a family he cares about, and that is all. But something kept bothering me. Jack beginning to act out against his dad, he says it like 3 times, "Dad, I'm scared you're going to leave me again, and this time forever." I thought there's no way this would actually happen. Jack's just very worried. But then the government showed up, and I guess they decided to betray us after helping them. They throw soldiers at us, so we look after the fam and send them off. But here's the moment that genuinely made me so bloody sad. Like, what the hell, Rockstar? John breathes in and out, and he's prepared to face it. John Marston dies. I love Arthur Morgan, but he was going to die soon anyway. I had no bloody idea that John was going to die in this game. Like, it does make sense, but everything was going so well, and then it just turned all on its head. I'm not kidding, towards the end of this game, I was thinking Jack would make a great playable character in Red Dead Redemption 3. I had no idea it was going to happen now. We see our father's grave and our mother's. Oh, and uncle died too, which was actually kind of sad. But I feel a personal attachment to John and Abigail, so to know she died soon after John just furthers my sadness. I played a little as Jack, but I didn't 100% the game. The original is pretty awesome, especially considering it's 15 years old now. And weirdly, although it made me very sad, the ending is epic. I don't know how a death can be epic, but maybe it's just the way he faced it. My final thoughts. Red Dead Redemption 2 is a great video game. And a great video game